All right. Thank you, and welcome to the Everyone Everywhere podcast. And happy Halloween, because it is Halloween. Happy Blizzard Week, because we had 3 days of snow, delay, early release, and then a full day off. So we're all kind of waking up from the hibernation. Today, I am joined by Michelle and Jordan. I am going to let them introduce themselves so that I don't mess it up. And I know how sometimes you get a little awkward when you're like, wait, what do they do? What's their title? How do I do this? So I'm going to just let them go ahead and do it. And we'll start with Jordan since she's new. And then Michelle is returning from last week. So welcome, Jordan.
Thanks, Eric. So my name's Jordan Thompson. I work with Blue Moon as a case manager and school liaison. So I kind of go into schools and bridge our gaps with communication as far as healthcare and mental health, making sure that our kids are stable and we don't miss any details. And then I'm also on the social media and fundraising piece. So I kind of do
everything.
A couple different jobs.
Many traits. Yeah. Thank you. And Michelle?
Yes, I'm Michelle Crastle. Thanks for having me back. And I am the owner and founder of Blue Moon Therapy Camp, Blue Moon Counseling. And so, happy to have Jordan here. I know we talked a lot last week about some interesting stuff and just wanted to kind of continue the conversation and bring Jordan here. A lot of her fundraising and media, which we're doing a lot of right now. And we do a lot of fundraising, and Jordan has helped me over probably the last 4 years with the fundraising of our Blue Moon annual toy drive. Mm-hmm. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. We'll work on that this year and just, want to answer and talk with you, Eric.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, thank you again for both being here. So like every other show, First Everywhere or Everyone Everywhere podcast, it's basically just our effort and our goal to break the stigma surrounding mental health. And this is one outlet, generally just through conversation and sharing each other's stories, and having a platform to kind of talk about what you want to talk about. So that's kind of our effort here for the podcast. But I think there's the overwhelming, effort just to start actually having real conversations about what is going on in our everyday lives, kids' lives in Colorado, especially since we all live here. This is where it takes place. But so that's a little bit of the background between the effort and then Blue Moon Counseling and Blue Moon Therapy, which does the therapy camp and helps quite a bit of children in Colorado that are at risk and have various degrees of mental illness, disorders, or just issues, whatever may fit in whatever criteria. But today, so the starting topic, we don't really have a outline or a real agenda to speak to, but just kind of start with a topic and also obviously have a place for you guys to go ahead and talk about some important things that are going in Blue Moon, some important things that are happening for camp, and just a lot of the information and the educating of hopefully our viewers, our followers, and people who are just interested in mental health in that aspect. And so today we're going to talk about, because it's another hot topic. We talked about Columbine last week, school shootings and gun control, and we can still have many conversations to think around it. But today we're going to talk about, the recent suicides that are happening in high schools mainly. But what's more scary is that it's happening in ages younger and younger. I think the last statistic I saw was like 10 to 24, not 16 or 18, but 10 years old. And I would hate to see that go into single digits, into 9, 8-year-olds, which, Michelle can probably talk a little bit more about, and seeing, is it safe to say, call it an epidemic?
It's a pretty serious issue right now for our youth and adults as well.
It's a crisis.
It is. It is a crisis. And we're just... myself as a mental health provider and my company and my team, we really have tried to have more of a creative and effective approach to helping reduce it, and helping treating it. A lot of the times individual therapy, I've been doing it for 12 years and I just don't believe that it's as effective as it could be for the kids who are suicidal, and no matter what their age may be. I know that most recently at Arapahoe, I'm just wanted to share my condolences about, Arapahoe High School and all the students. I know that you lost a student, And suicide is always out of nowhere, no matter how much warning we have. And I'm really passionate about the students who are left behind, the friends, the kids in the school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's really who I advocate for, and Jordan advocates for. You know, we really advocate for the youth. And I know that we don't have a perfect plan in place to take care of everybody, you know, when the suicide happens. And I have some ideas, and we've done some different things that seem to be really helping. So we hope that our methods are spread and are able to help more youth, no matter if you're in high school or elementary school, when you lose someone. So I guess today I'm thinking more even about not even the kids who have been suicidal, who have died, who have killed themselves, and that tragedy and what that's ripple effect has done to their family and the people who love them and their community and everybody. But I really am advocating today for the students who are left behind.
Yeah.
And that's who I'm most passionate about helping, and that's what usually who we effectively help as well, because we've got to make sure that they're okay.
Right.
We don't want to see any more suicides happening, especially I know suicide is just such an intense, powerful, emotional experience for everyone everywhere who's in that community.
Right.
And so I just don't want to see another suicide. I don't want to see somebody who's struggling and isolated and depressed right now. Sometimes it can kind of impact like a trickle effect. And so I just don't want to see that happen. So I definitely want to talk about it and see how we can help.
Yeah.
How Blue Moon can help the community of what's happening. And if Arapahoe High School needs anything, or any of the other kids out there who are needing my help or our help, we definitely want to make an urgent response.
And I want to frame it up to include Jordan on this conversation because, well, one, I don't really want to feel like I'm outing or picking on Centennial or, Littleton, because we live here. This is where I live. It's where you live. Highlands Ranch, Littleton, Inglewood, Centennial. And so that's why, obviously, being so close, and I'm going to bring these things up. This is what I'm reading. This is what's, really impacted my life. But it's funny how, again, everywhere, everyone, or everyone, everywhere, it's really kind of like these issues are happening everywhere, and it's happening to everyone. And so, like, even me sharing something so close, obviously, is impacting and is happening everywhere else. So I think it's allowing us, again, through conversation to kind of like, bring everything, I think everybody, at least more eye to eye, a little bit more human to each other, reusing empathy. So let me frame up, some of the tragedy, some of the things that I think warrants a little bit of kind of like what's going on, and kind of the breadth of the situation. So since 2013, Arapahoe High School has now 9 suicides. So that's more than once a year, right? 1 year ago from this week, or last week, October 18th, I believe, of 2018, somewhere in there. But they had it back-to-back. Suicides that happened, I think, within 3 days of each other. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to get a lot of the information wrong, but I don't think it's really, important to really get all into the details. But so that happened, right? And then in the same kind of story, and as I'm reading, some of these news articles, Cherry Creek came up, and they had a back-to-back, or they had 2 suicides in one semester, and that was just this last March in the spring. So 2 high schools within 10 minutes from my house. My daughter most likely will go to Arapahoe High School. And in 2013, so that was 2013, and that's when I believe the shooting also happened, where Claire, I don't want to get her name wrong, but there was a death there, and a student had gone there, obviously to do a school shooting. Mm-hmm. They don't call it successful, but a loss of life, so just as tragic. But so 9 suicides in 6 years, including a school shooting, and in between that, we've had the other school shootings, the Aurora school shootings, or the Aurora theater shooting. So, from last week, we carried on and talked about Columbine, and all these things are happening just from a shooting point of view, right? Well, now we're jumping into the suicide point of view of things that are going on. And I think you could probably sum up some stuff that, like bullying, abuse, neglect, depression. It's not just a suicidal, So as a school liaison, I want to kind of frame that up and showing, just like we did last week, that these epidemics aren't really stopping. They're not slowing down. They're getting worse, and they're growing at a rapid rate. And suicide, especially amongst girls, 10 to 18, and I think it was 183% jump in the last 3 years. So that's the frame up to be, it's such great news. But what's your reality as far as some of your experience, what you're seeing in the schools, and most recently some of the kids that you're dealing with in Blue Moon Therapy Camp? What are those things that you can kind of relate to, the viewers especially, but maybe there's a parent out there who's just like, I don't know what's going on. This is all so crazy, and I'm just trying to focus on my life. Could you give insight in a lot of those avenues? Not to make it a big question, but...
Totally. I mean, that is a super broad question, but I feel like a lot of it stems from bullying, especially in young women who are trying to figure out their footing in life and who they are, and they're growing into themselves, and their body type is being made fun of, or their style choice is being made fun of. And I mean, even the cool girls are getting made fun of. Like, it's all of us. It literally is everyone everywhere. And I get on apps like TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, and people are just so mean. And kids are just on these keyboards being warriors behind a screen.
You're right.
And picking on these kids, it's unbelievable. So a lot of the school liaison piece comes in. We've had I've worked with Michelle on a couple safety plans for some of our kids who do have suicidal tendencies.
Yeah.
And I feel like the biggest mishap maybe that parents can look out for is having a team up with a therapist who can help bridge those gaps of communication. Because I know for me, being a kid who was in and out of the counselor's office growing up, is there was no communication home with my counselor. And even if they did communicate home, my mom was the one causing a lot of the problems. So there wasn't a safe avenue to communicate. My problems were with an unstable household. So how do you call an unstable mom and be like, hey, your kid's showing signs of instability at home, and they're showing through at school? So I think that having an avenue like a therapy camp, or having a safe place for that kid to go, so being the school liaison, the school calls me.
Right.
And then when there's a red flag, like, hey, we've seen so-and-so was drawing pictures that were kind of suicidal or showing us some red flags. Can you come in? And then I would contact Michelle and be like, hey, we have a really scary situation.
Yeah.
We have a red flag alert with one of our kiddos. They're showing some suicidal thoughts. And being able to just bridge that gap so there isn't a lapse in communication. So then when that kid is showing those scary signs, the school has a place to go, and then the kid isn't forgotten about. And it's not like, oh, that's scary, let's call mom and let them know.
Right.
But next thing you know, mom's drinking at home, doesn't do anything about it, and then the kid ends up taking action on their scary thoughts.
So if we're to walk back just a couple for both of you, right, and to allow, I guess, a little bit of that, hey, what's the therapy camp again, right? I kind of try to pick apart the special sauce. It's like kind of my thing. But it's funny, right? Because like you read the articles and you look at what's happening still, right? And we go, okay, in the last 6 years, it's just happening. And the last 20 years since Columbine, it's still happening. I feel like there's little change in the process. There's little change in the reaction. Like it's almost the same now, where like you see the suicide, you read the article, and they're like, we're going to meet at the high school or a church, here next week. We invite everybody from the community. We'll have mental health providers there, and we're going to talk about it and talk for ways about parents to talk about suicide with their children. And I just feel like it's so topical. It's like putting lotion, and it's like, you're not so dry anymore, it's like, and it's now we got to do something about it. But then we look and we really kind of look deep, and funding is taken away, right? Layers and layers of support and resources are taken away, or really just not out there available as easily accessible. And it's kind of like that Band-Aid thing, right? Like you just said, how do I have a discussion with the parent when a lot of times, there's that in the house. That's the issue, the problem, or a catalyst.
There's pain there.
There's lots of pain. And so when you have these things where like, I guess the solutions are so bare minimum, and it's, again, there's no fault, there's no blame here to give. It just feels like it's this empty cycle. And we convince ourselves that if we can do these things, then at least we're doing something, right? So Blue Moon Therapy Camp is doing something completely different. And what I don't want to risk for the sake of is just passing conversation where you start talking about things that our program does or the program does. But when you really layer it back, how much time is involved? How many different things are you trying to do to get the attention of that child? how much face-to-face time, how much group time, how important is it to have peers there while doing some therapy? So you're not feeling like you're that kid in the office one-on-one, I'm in trouble, I'm a problem, everybody hates me, right? And so like I got to give credit to where it's at, but I want you guys kind of expand on some of those, some things that parents and clients, listening today, they need the insight. Why is it so different at your therapy camp? Why is it helping in a different way? Because traditionally right now, I see there's, my son or daughter's cutting. I have no idea why. They won't have a conversation with me. What are you trying to tell me that your therapy camp's going to do for me and my kid when I just can't even get them to open up? I'm scared they won't want to go. I don't know how you gain trust.
Well, I think that's just giving you a little framework of therapy camp, and in that situation, to clarify, you're saying, if a parent is going through that right now, if a parent knows their child or teen is going through some sort of a depression and they're unhappy and they might be self-harming, or you maybe got a call from school, or maybe there was a letter, maybe there was a wellness call from the police that came to your house. All those things are are red flags that happen as soon as a child opens up a little bit about that's how the system happens. Therapy camp is, the reason we call it camp is because we're taking out the stigma of mental illness. So instead of me doing one-on-one therapy the way that I used to do that, where, let's say Jordan's in the school and she gets a call and they say, let's get so-and-so a therapist, and then I'm sitting in the room one-on-one. Usually it's about 12 sessions. Usually somebody will pay for. This is different because we're bringing the kids together as a unit, and so that's why it's camp. So summer camp is the basis of where we bring the joy and the lightness and the community and the activities and the adventures and all these things. We do really amazing, fun things for these kids that are age appropriate, and we do the therapy within that unit. So instead of one-on-one talking with Michelle where they're embarrassed and all that stigma and I don't want my friends to know, and I can, in reality, I've done 12 sessions with a lot of these kids, and to be honest, at the end of 12 sessions, they're better and more stable, but because it's like what Jordan was saying, it's such an ongoing issue in the school with peers and girls, and it's like so easily a wound that we do a little healing on, but it can just be reopened and they can be suicidal again, especially if they've fallen into a place of self-harm. Self-harm is an addictive form of it's a coping skill that's damaging, but it is a physical pain release, which releases a sense of emotional pain. But what happens is your brain gets addicted. Same thing as an eating disorder. It's something that children do when they're suffering is they restrict what they eat. So they have a sense of control, and they might hate themselves because of something happened or the way their body looks. And so they stop to eating to control that, and it becomes an addictive, negative coping skill. So we have to replace those coping skills with something new. Otherwise, they're going to just default back to cutting and to starving themselves. So therapy camp is saying, okay, hey, I got a call. There are a lot of kids who are unhappy. Definitely kids that are needing this. The difference is when you come to therapy camp, you're going to see me, you're going to see Jordan, you're going to see Eric, you're going to see our team of people that are really excellent and highly trained in working with youth. So not all licensed therapists, but all have a different background that we collaborate with. And what we do that nobody else does is we make your kids feel so comfortable, and through fun and adventure, and with counseling being tied into those amazing things, then we're able to get to the root of the bottom, the root of the issue, and we're able to kind of reduce that depression much more effectively. So like, let's say for Arapahoe High School students, what I would do if I was doing a therapy camp, and what we could do, it's like, so if Jordan and I are planning an event for these kids who are struggling at Arapahoe High School, and I know they're there, let's say that we're gonna tie into something that they're gonna actually want to be at. So like, let's say that we're gonna do something, we're gonna do ropes course. Right? Where we're going to be outside, we're going to be someplace that you're moving your body, that it's okay to go for the very first time, because that sounds a little bit more like an adventure, right? And one thing I really want to teach them how is like taking the kids to like a shooting range at that age. Like, let's empower you by teaching you the safety skills of shooting armed guns in a recreational, safe learning, because we're building a skill, we're building confidence, we're reducing, some of their anger by expressing that, as well as, giving them a safe outlet. And those are the types of pieces that I would do for a therapy camp that would be more age appropriate for the high schoolers. So like, let's get out, get away from the school, let's go retreat, let's go shoot, let's go do something cool. And while we're doing something cool, then that's when Jordan and I come in. That's where our team come in. And when they're a little more relaxed and they're in an environment where they're like, wow, look around at all these other 15 teenagers who also feel isolated, depressed, have self-harmed, and now I'm not alone.
Right.
I don't even have to talk about the fact that I am cutting because I'm unhappy about who I am, or I'm unhappy about a divorce, or I'm unhappy about something, because it is coming from an emotional pain place.
Yeah.
It's looking around, and now I'm not isolated anymore, because now I can look at all my other peers that are here, and they're talking to Jordan, and they're shooting guns, and they're talking about depression. So like, hey, this is okay, and we can actually make progress with them and assess them so much better. Because if we individual therapy, you're just gonna have to talk to me about what's wrong. You have to talk to me about your pain instead of doing it in an environment that you're comfortable, instead of seeing your peers or friends. And we're recreating a social environment for these kids and youth that's positive. We don't bully at camp. We have rules and boundaries. We're there. We're teaching them conflict resolution.
Yeah.
We're helping them
It still happens, but it's professionals there to catch it and also work out, help them cope with it, but also give them words to kind of work this out.
Exactly. Yeah, we
As opposed to school, it's like, that's it. You got your friend in front of another friend, and it just escalates, and there's nobody to intervene.
Yeah, like a couple days ago, I had 6 kids who have been in and out of the office, and Jordan's been helping with them, that have various reasons about them feeling suicidal, different things in there. And instead of them having to isolate and feel bad and all those emotions, I don't know exactly how they feel. It's like, oh, yeah, I remember when social services came and talked to me, and they have this funny looking computer, which I actually had never even heard of, but all the girls knew
about this funny
old school computer that social services comes, because, social services will come if you go and say, hey, my parent hurt me and now I'm depressed and now I'm suicidal. They automatically, have to report. And so they're going to get that CPS call, and they're going to get that weird computer. And they all talked about what it was like at the hospital when they had that 72-hour hold, and why I don't want to go, and what happened when I did go. And they talked about the lunch that they had there. And they were like, okay, well, it wasn't all that bad, but yeah, I am on meds. Okay, is it making you feel better? Is it not? And all of a sudden they're able to talk, 6 kids, and they're like, oh, I guess that this is not this strange phenomenon.
It's kind of normal to them once they've shared it, but individually, like you said, it's so isolating because people don't want to even really let you know what they had to go through, right? It's funny, Jordan, you and I actually had this conversation with Chris earlier, non-prompted, but kind of that same process, right? That whole, once you kind of get medically intervened, there's an intervention that happens, whether it's medically state, parents, guardian, whatnot. But then it's almost kind of like, in my view, it's like a medicated birth, like you can have a natural and you have a little bit more control over the situation. And as soon as you get that, the epidural starts happening, and then the doctors start showing up, and, it's like they kind of take over, the process takes over, and like you were saying, human services, CPS, and once those things get escalated, it's almost like the parent guardian loses control or even more power of the situation, which in a situation where they're already powerless and probably feel like no control. But I think there's, one thing that I think we can identify too is kind of this relationship between this rise, right? The suicides and this depression and abuse is kind of on the rise. And what else is very much on the rise? Well, the one thing I keep reading about is social media. Why you do social media, and you do it very well, Jordan. And I think there's, so many ways, and it's still so new that it's hard to wrap and have, I think, a very clear point of view from the public. Myself, I'm so inept. Like, you're going to go to my Facebook and see a Halloween from 5 years ago pictures, It's true. It's very true. And I think there are some, there's, age differences, generational differences, what men usually do on social media, what women do, what girls and boys. And so, social media is this very large thing now that's, I think, with the introduction of TikTok, I just read, got to 500 million users which is ahead of Twitter. So I think they're second or third ranked in there. I think even more than Instagram. And we talked last week about how kids have, this, they monetize followers, they monetize popularity, where now it's used as kind of that, it's my show of success, it's my worth.
We all want to
right?
be known.
We all want to
That's
be.
the biggest thing. And I think that that was kind of touching on what Michelle said about camp, is that it offers that piece of we all know each other because we have that familiarity. So social media, we can be whoever, and then we can look around and see that everyone else is kind of doing the same thing, and we can follow the trends, and we can kind of try to say things are hard at home or hard at school, or we don't fit in somewhere. Online, you can be whatever you want.
Would you say it's more dangerous as an adolescent girl from 10 to 16, let's put 10 to 18, let's keep it right there, under legal age, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel it's more dangerous, technology, social media, for an adolescent girl now than it really, I think, than it is for one same age, same group boys, right?
Yeah. I feel like it's scary for, honestly, both genders for multiple different reasons. I mean, I'm a 30-year-old woman, and I struggle with some of the stuff that I see. And there's times where I'll scroll through Instagram and see a girl with a perfect body, and I'm next thing I know, I'm oh, I probably shouldn't eat that for dinner. I'm trying to lose weight, and I beat myself up because at my fingertips, I have I've become numb to crazy news because there's
Did you have it though when you were 10 years old? When
No.
you were 11?
No.
And so we can't really, I don't feel like we have that personal experience with it at their age. Could you imagine now?
The pressure.
I can't.
Mm-mm.
I'm so fearful from it already. And I'm, like you said, I'm 38, I'm an adult. I'm adulting. I'm scared of social media in a lot of ways.
I'm interested though with Jordan though, because Jordan has more of a social media,
I would say you're
footprint than us, I would say, as
Absolutely.
old parents. But Jordan, you have both the unique experience of being really into social media before even, Blue Moon, for your own businesses and things like that. Definitely an entrepreneur. But then been talking to these kids about their experience with social media. I mean, what do you think that these girls and boys are experiencing on social media that are working towards the suicide, towards the bullying? What do they experience that maybe is hurting them?
I mean, I am on TikTok now. I got the app randomly as what is this? I saw an ad for it and I was oh, that looks kind of fun. It's cool videos. Well, I started scrolling through it, and the amount of comments on these things that were hateful, brutally mean, nitpicking things about people that, I mean, even thinking things like that about other people, but let alone typing them out and then posting them publicly it's terrifying to me to watch that people can be that mean and that hurtful and that judgmental. People will put themselves out there and say they'll sing a song a cappella.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that opens the door. They're choosing to do that, and they're choosing to be bold and brave. But then there's so many mean people that put them down for choosing to be bold and brave. And or weight comments. Oh yeah. The comment section is the biggest thing. But then there's also pressure, because then you look at who has all the followers, and then the pressure to look a certain way, wear a certain thing, for the people who can't afford to be a Visco girl or can't afford to have all the cool hip trends.
Yeah.
I mean, or AirPods. Yeah.
Vans,
Crocs.
AirPods.
Yeah. All of our kids want all these cool things, and they can't afford to have them. So then they start looking at their family and looking at where they're going wrong and all the ways they don't fit in. And then they start discrediting themselves, and they don't look like her, or I don't have long, pretty hair like her, or my makeup skills don't look like hers, or I can't afford that palette or that backpack or that water bottle. So it's just, I think the pressure that's put on, if I want to have followers and I want to have any kind of relevance in the social media world, I have to look a certain way and afford a certain thing. And it's just so much pressure on these kids that they almost start second guessing themselves. I mean, I found myself doing it, posting on, I started just posting uplifting things.
Yeah.
And even then I'm I don't know, that probably sounded stupid. I shouldn't post that.
Yeah,
People are going to judge me, or someone's going to hate on me in the comment section. And then I had someone do it, and I was I made it. Someone was mean to me in the comment
Nothing's
section.
really changed. I mean, it was just like when we were kids, the same pressures, right? And same law of judgment, stereotypes, prejudice, whatever you want to call it. And then now here we are, but now technology.
It's more in your face, I feel like.
I mean, it just makes it that much harder. At the same time, it's almost kind of like so much noise too that it almost dumbs it down some as well. I just can't imagine there being so much information, so many ways to be attacked, so many social media platforms, and to be a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, boy or girl, and just trying to be like going through puberty, going through some weird awkwardness anyway. And then now I got to deal with all this. And then I'm already isolated. And then we talked about Breakfast Club last, episode. We still have these stereotypes. We still get clicks. We still do these, they still do it. And it's just a process, right? We all say that it's kind of growing up. It's a process of, being an adolescent, really, being a kid and trying to figure out your way and, having, support groups and your group and what's cool or what's not. And you touched on, cool factor. And we live in a world now is like, what is cool? And it's cool not to be cool. And it's cool to, and even the words that we use now, are we woke? That's a new one. President Obama just came and spoke at an event and talked about being woke and this woke generation of how it's like, I'm going to call people out. I'm going to tell you and judge you. And then my work is done. As long as I can blast somebody online and everybody can see I blasted you, then my work is done. And he says this is a growing impending problem. I shouldn't say that. I like politics. I like talking about politics because there's so many things I think that cross, right, into here and there. So you got Blue Moon Therapy Camp. And now we have this social media that's just in day, but you guys do a little bit different. We all have, rules and different guidelines to fall into camp. And I think there are some principally good rules that are just kind of speak to exactly the heart of it. So you're no technology rule, Michelle.
Yes.
It sounds simple, right? It's like, oh yeah, just unplug and whatnot. But I think it goes a little bit deeper into that. And it's funny how our culture has flipped. And what kids are now faced with is like needing to be unplugged. It's not a choice anymore.
Well, we have these 3 rules at therapy camp that allow it to be in an environment that's necessary for the kids to feel comfortable and safe in a couple ways. So our our 3rd rule is no technology at camp. And when I started forming this camp, it came from a lot of clients and kids that I had known for a couple years and that I've been working with, and I had been creatively trying to figure out how to really make a bigger difference in their life, like really take them from, I think individual therapy, I was doing a good job with these kids and these teenagers of survival, that they were able to, okay, I can get through another week. Okay, I didn't cut this week. Okay, I made a friend this week. And so there were these little kind of improvements that I was able to see, but I was not able to get to the social issue. I wasn't able to get to the self-esteem issue the same capacity, because really, how do we build our self-esteem without positive social relationships? If I isolated myself, I could tell myself, as many things I could or meditate as much to try to build my self-esteem, but really self-esteem and self-worth. And at that age, when you're forming who you are as a person, it's so important to have positive social interactions and relationships. So I had to touch that. And so at therapy camp, we did that, but I knew so many of my kids struggled with addiction of technology because one, I had spent time with them, and so it's hard enough for them to put their phone away for 1 hour, and a lot of my teenagers, I had to compromise. Okay, we can put music on. We can do a couple things in the hour, but I knew it was because it's their escape. Mom and dad are fighting. It's my escape, and it's just invisible to their parents' world. So it's this private identity. And a lot of parents don't even want to check their social media because they're trying to give their kids privacy, but at the same time, so much could be happening that the parents have absolutely no idea. And so the no technology at camp came into place because I needed to unplug the youth and the preteens, most importantly, my 12, 13, and 14-year-olds and 10-year-olds as well, but really that middle school age, 11, 12, 13, 14 needed to be unplugged. And what's happened since they know that they can't be plugged in during at therapy camp, then they're like present. And they have to find other ways of communicating with their peers, because if I let them have their phone and there's moments where like, okay, in the car or whatnot, and then this is how their social interaction is, it's like, okay, Jordan, look at your phone. I'll look at my phone. And then we're like doing videos and we're sharing it between each other, but your face is always in the phone. So removing the technology has allowed them to like see the world and like, okay, we are outside, we are camping, we are paddleboarding, we are on a hike, and there's not a phone to like selfie distract. And it's quite refreshing, and it's allowed them to really develop their social relationships to a different capacity, and the conflict resolution too, because a lot of it is they, in the beginning, especially that group when they were forming, is they wanted to talk about drama at school. Like, here, this is what's happening at school, and this is what we all do. This is socially what we do, is we talk about each other, we complain, we talk drama, and then we go home and then we talk about it on technology. It's like this continuation of drama is really their world. And at therapy camp, it broke it up because we unplugged them so they couldn't continue the drama. And then we had kind of a rule too, is that you can't bring your school drama right into camp to continue it. Like, you have to find other things to talk about and to communicate with. And they really did. They shifted. They really strengthened their relationships. They've found a lot of things that they like to do together. They're a tight unit. Yeah. And so that was really something neat. And, the other two rules are different, but, just to go over it, the first rule is everybody has kind of a bubble of protection and safety and space.
Physically, verbally,
yes.
It's your bubble.
Yes, it's a bubble of boundary. So if Jordan doesn't want me to give her a hug, I have to respect that boundary. She has personal and physical space, and we had to teach all the kids involved of how to respect that, because no matter what the background is, kids don't always get that. Like, even at high school, if kids had, if they have a bubble of space and protection and like the right to say, get out of my bubble, which is what we say, then they don't have to worry about people coming up and touching them or grabbing them or hitting them or pushing them. It really creates a different level of safety that a lot of kids and youth in this environment don't have. And so that was really important to layer that safety in. And that's really made a difference. And teaching the kids, how do you read that? How do you read it if Jordan doesn't want a hug? What are her social cues saying? Because a lot of people don't like to be touched for their own reasons. And a lot of people are very huggy and touchy. And a lot of people are not. I think a lot of the youth and high school, you don't really worry about how other people feel. You just force upon yourself the hug or the touch or whatnot, and it just damages some of that safety in relationships. And then the other rule is, you're allowed to feel whatever you feel. You just have to kind of stay with the group. So that really eliminates, somebody getting mad and running off or hiking. It's like, you can be mad, you can be, you can cry, you could be real pissed off, but you just got to stay with us and we'll work through it. And so those are our 3 rules at camp that we've done to create the right environment for these.
And it's funny, it's kind of like one of those common sense parental lessons that you all kind of learn, right? Of like, kids want structure. They thirst it, they quench it. They need it to a certain point, obviously. And I think, again, when you're talking about, there's semblance of balance in life. There's always a balance. And, again, I hate to be judgy and you don't want to blame, and it's like, it's already so hard, and it's already hard for parents, and to expect them, again, expectations, Jordan's story is, I think it's very relevant, and being a single mother and having, Tom is just awesome. So you're raising he's going to be an awesome kid, and already is, I should say, but, structure, and the choices that we have to make, and those 3 rules, a lot of that is really stemming to being like self-control, right? How can you guys focus a little bit but have a little self-control? Don't touch somebody. And isn't it funny how it's just a reactionary thing, or they're like impulsively just grabbing or touching or hitting, and then you're like, can you respect your bubble? And it seems like an easy rule, especially for somebody like myself. I was, it was military grade, kind of raising. And my father absolutely, sit on the couch, don't say a word, and don't touch each other. There's me, my brother, my sister sitting on the couch, not touching, moving. And parents are like, who are those great kids, right? Who are these golden angels? They're awesome. And then we try to teach that. No technology, right? This consumption, this there should be an addiction problem. There should be this, I think, a real conversation around, just like drug abuse, there is phone abuse. There's this real thing about, not being able to get off of it. And then, feeling what you want to feel, but not leaving, not running away, not taking it out in complete anger. Again, this level of self-control, right?
Which does help with the suicide piece, because a lot of the people who are feeling suicidal are keeping all those feelings shoved, they're not expressing their feelings.
Yes.
They're at a point of like, I'm at the bottom of the barrel. I am not okay. I am not okay. And I don't even know how to talk about it anymore, and who would even listen. And there's been months that I've needed to talk.
Yeah.
And now I'm at the bottom, and now I want to die.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
I mean, Jordan, like, how quick does it take for you to get from 0 to 100? Like how quickly does it happen? Because
I've seen it happen in kids, like some of our kids. When I help at school, they'll go to school the day before and they're fine.
Yeah.
And I see them at camp and they're doing great. And then the next day I get a call that they were triggered by something. It's one thing that can trigger them. And I can say, just touching on the rules too, that this gives them a sense of their own voice at camp. And I've seen them respond so well to this structure because they're allowed to say, I have my own boundaries, which at home they may not. Like, oh, you have to go give Uncle so-and-so a hug, or you have to share with your sister and go play nice with them, or, and they don't have their own boundaries. And at camp they do.
Yeah.
And they can have their own say, like, I don't really feel like being touched right now. Or we have littles who will pout, but they still have to come with the group. So like, okay, you can feel those things, but we're going to keep going. We're going to continue on with what we're doing. And honestly, every single kid voluntarily puts their phone away every single time they walk in the door. I don't have a problem with having to tell them not to be on it. They come in and they see their friends, and
it's almost like they wanted to.
Yes,
it's nobody's telling me to cut off.
And back to the suicidal thing, they get pulled out of that alternate universe and get to be present at camp and feel those feelings and know that their safety net of their counselor is there. So if they start to feel anxious or depressed or fearful, that person's right there. If they start to feel like alone, their friends are right here, their mentors right here. There's a safety net completely around them for them to feel everything they need to feel. And it's the one thing I've seen work doing this. I had a social worker tell me this is the first time she's ever seen a program care and work. She voluntarily told me and looked at me and she's like, you guys can't, you have to be here forever.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen something work, and there's never been a program that I've seen that's been more pro kids than this. And I couldn't agree with her more. Like, I look at the kids and I see them succeeding because they have a safety net in front of them, behind them, both sides. Like, they can't get too far no matter how much they try to isolate. They have people.
It's like you almost took the isolation away from them. That power of isolation, right?
They can
we won't
take a
let you
minute,
be alone. We're not going to let you go in that closet.
We're here. We love you. You can take a minute, but we're right here.
And that's the biggest thing. And that's what is the biggest solution, is reducing the isolation and the loneliness, which is, being talked about in the government and at that level. There's that is the epidemic. That is the issue.
Yeah.
And you cannot fix isolation and loneliness through individual counseling to the same capacity as a camp where you're around other people who get it. It's just impossible. And so we're just kind of arming the kids with as much support from every angle, and the family members, because that's another thing. Individual, if I'm just working with your teen, then the parents are getting absolutely no support. And a lot of the times parents don't necessarily love it because, well, what is my kid talking about for an hour? And then they come home and their behavior's not changing. Parents really look at behaviors.
Parents don't really get much of that information from a therapist.
No, because especially at that age, you have to protect the confidentiality of the child. They legally have confidentiality up to the age of 15, where if a parent brings in a 13-year-old, they are in charge of the confidential information. But what I always tell the children and the families is that I have to respect the confidentiality of the child as my priority. So I don't tell the parents what the child says unless it's a matter of danger or safety, where them being, the legal guardians, they, if they're hurting themselves or others, or someone's hurting them, or if there's a drug or alcohol, any danger, I will definitely let know. But I don't breach that confidentiality with the child. So the parent is just waiting in the waiting room, and it is not included and not involved. And most of the time the youth wants them nowhere near the room.
Yeah.
But this way it's like, oh, I don't have to have that same level of confidentiality because now we're in a group full of kids and they all know they all feel the same thing. And if I want to bring up something that's hard for all of them that I know that they experience, it's like, boom, it's right there in the room. It's not this same level of confidentiality because we're all doing this together as a group.
Yeah.
And it's different than like a typical group therapy, which is usually like 2 hours of, if you go to a support group, you used that word before, if you go to a support group for kids who've self-harm. That is positive, I'm sure, because they're getting the element of other kids. However, I'm just picturing, how I used to do a traditional group therapy, and I did that for, a long time, which is where this started. I've been a group therapist for 12 years. I've always believed in the power of groups more so than individual.
Yeah.
But then it's this 2-hour structure. Let's sit in a room, let's talk about it, and then they go home. And I think that the stigma is still there because we're not tying in adventure. We're not tying in the social unit. We're not giving them a moment to breathe and see their friends and build relationships, because usually it's like, okay, hey, 6 weeks, 2 hours a week, we're going to come and we're going to try to break you of this. And then they say goodbye.
Yeah.
And this is more of creating a community where hopefully, and I've already seen it, the FaceTime and the communication of the counselors and the communication between the peers, they've created a community in a village. Hopefully that will go way beyond something that was just 6 weeks long.
I think
they get to look forward to it too. I feel like I've gotten texts that's like, I had a really hard day at school today. I can't wait to get to camp. Yeah. Or like knowing that even though it may be really hard and they may be struggling at home, the next day is camp. Or they may be struggling at school. Well, a couple hours is camp. And I think that gives them like that, okay, I'm going to hold on for a little bit longer because then I have my outlet.
Look forward to.
Safe space. And then tying in the intervention, which is always different depending on when we're teaching. But, one of the interventions the kids really loved was, creating these volcanoes, and it's funny, but these volcanoes and these lanterns, kind of this art example of like, what is it? What is a volcano? What is it building under there? What is in the lava? What are you hiding? What is deep in there? What do you not say? What's about to explode?
Yeah.
And then allowing them to put all those things they're angry about or what they're upset or what they're hiding or their secrets. Because sometimes kids can't even tell me their secrets. And I don't even want them to in a lot of capacity. Like they get to own their secrets and their story. And kids are smart enough to know what to tell and what not.
Yeah. And how much do you really need to even hear without even really knowing, right? Like kids and adults the same can like read between the lines, right? You know what's going on. I know what's going on. But we also know that if we say it straightforward, I'm smart enough not to say it straightforward, right?
Yeah, there's consequences, depending on the situation. So here, I'm going to build this volcano, and then I'm going to be able to take it outside, and I'm going to be able to beat it up and destroy it and express all of my anger by, like, beating this structure up. And, like, it was really powerful. And it just, I want to be able to do that again because, it's this expression of, hey, I'm not just talking in a room, but I'm with my peers. They all have volcanoes. I got volcanoes. There's this art expression. I'm learning how to cope in a different way. And instead of me cutting my arm, hey, I can build something. I can write something. I can pour my truth onto paper in a way that people can't read it. And then I can go and I can beat it up, or I can do a burning, or I can do different ways to release my heavy emotions other than cutting my arm. And that's really what these kids need to learn, is alternative ways to get all the feelings out.
Yeah. With I think the age group that comes to camp is so unique in itself that you start creating a support system, but like role and position, if I'm an only child and I don't have siblings, all of a sudden I feel like I'm in a group with siblings. And then I have cousins and it feels like an extended family almost. The older ones start taking care of the younger ones. The younger ones start looking up to the older ones, right? So there's like, again, as our viewers are listening, that, we can put so many things on a screen and we can show a presentation and we can have an orientation, we can have our events. But I think it's really pertinent to have these discussions and these conversations so you can actually hear, I think, the breadth and the depth of the program itself. We were going to have Sarah Mosier on here, who's program director for Blue Moon, and a therapist as well. So we'll probably have him join again. And it's kind of my effort again with, along with this campaign and trying to break stigma, is to bring in professionals and not just like, in Jordan's instance, somebody who can do so many various things as a professional, but how do we incorporate it with the kids, right? This being a very kid-centric, we've already spoken a little bit about the parent side of it, which I want to bring up a little bit later on in a different show, just about the parent side of things, because we kind of keep coming back. I do want to kind of come back because I think we just went over it a bit and I didn't kind of really dig into it. But Jordan, Dom's 3 years old. Is that correct? He just turned three. And you're about to go into kind of that season of him becoming who he wants to be, really, right? There was a crazy magical change in Kai when he just like was this toddler, but then started actually having conversation, was like a thinking person. And you're like, whoa, human. And Dom's about to be there. You have all these things and you're engaged and, all these things stacked up. Would you consider that no matter at what level Dom is, would you see the benefit of camp for him no matter where he's at in life?
100%. So I feel like he's come to camp with me since we've been there, and I've seen him grow verbally.
Yeah.
Because he's around other peers.
Hear it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also, he's just come into himself. He's in a safe place and he's learning. And also being a single mom, the biggest thing for me is he doesn't have his dad around. So in talking to some of the other kids, they've talked about how their dad's not around.
Yeah.
Or how he's not around as much as they would like. Or, they all have these things. And I was able to ask them, I'm like, does that bother you?
Yeah.
To kind of prepare myself as a single mom to be like, okay, how does that make you feel? What do you wish that you could see from that? And kind of be able to try to help guide Dom as he grows up and navigates what that looks like for him. But I think him learning these skills of how to address his feelings and how to talk about them and how to be himself and become himself and be able to express those emotions. Like I do feel kind of bummed out, or I do feel like I don't ever want to hear him say that he wasn't chosen by that parent or deal with any of those heartaches. But I think that we're going to have to navigate those at some point. So it's kind of cool to have those, have this place that he has an outlet like that. To be honest, I've said it before that I think that everyone should go through some form of therapy or counseling at some point in their lives because let's be real, we all have something. Everyone, everywhere has something going on, whether it doesn't matter. Whether it's OCD to anxiety. Like, I mean, I've had someone look at me the other day and be like, you don't look like someone that would have anxiety. And I'm like, well, what does that person look like?
Right.
And I honestly, I struggle with going new places. I have people look at me and they're like, how are you not confident? How do you not feel this? And I'm like, well, I just don't.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. And it's just something I've always struggled with. And it's probably from my upbringing. I came from a really broken home. So I've struggled constantly with my identity and who I am and building that. So being able to set the stage for Dom in a different way has been really cool to see that. So I really honestly feel there's not anyone. I feel like there's those parents that they haven't had CPS called or they don't see their kid cutting. That doesn't mean that your kid isn't going through something.
That's not that bad.
Oh, no. So-and-so, they're fine. They do good in school. They like sports. They've got friends. I can promise you there's probably something they want to talk about or they would identify with another peer at camp.
And that's that preventative piece that we're trying to do more with everyone everywhere. And we're trying to promote is like, we can prevent stuff. We can prevent them from struggling more when they get a little older. The earlier we get them, the better to teach them these things and to give them that space and to teach them a different perspective on the world and a different type of community so that it just gets rid of that isolation and that they learn how to talk about how they feel.
Yeah.
Like that's huge.
Like,
and our
why
topic
wait till they're cutting or why wait till...
Well, what's interesting is the topic today, what we talk about is Arapahoe and Cherry Creek, one of the most affluent high schools, right? In a very, obvious neighborhoods. And I think the economics around those schools has always brought into question why, right? Why do we not see this happening in some of our more urban schools, right? And it's happening in some of the more affluent neighborhoods, right? And I think there's a lot to say about that, just in the fact that it does impact anybody. You're not really safe from it, and what you may think looks a certain way, but really the undertones of it and what we see and why we're even talking and why we're sitting here is because it's not working. It's the problems are existing. You can't just shy away from it. You can just try to ignore it, but then it comes back almost even worse. It becomes a crisis. It becomes a murder. It becomes a suicide. And now it's like I have to react, right? Like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. which we do all know. And I think that's why we have these conversations, and one is like discussing those things about, well, it seems like camp, you guys figured it out. It sounds like you guys have this program. It sounds like you have those things. Then why isn't it more? Why aren't there these bigger things that are happening? Which I shouldn't really say that, because why are we here? And, I think culture is changing and shifting, where there is more of a realistic view of things that are happening now, even in the government as we speak, right? Back to a little bit of the politics. But it shows you the discontent, right? It shows you the division in this country alone of, matter of factly, what our problems are, right? And it's not economics. It's not about the poor or the rich in a lot of ways. I think that those create and cause so much distraction and disruption. And it's not a fair system. But to just whine and complain about an unfair system doesn't help or change anything within the system. And so we sit here and we talk about very blatant things that are just wrong, right, in our culture. How funny kids go to school, spend their time to learn something, when most of that time I feel isn't really learning anything. It's almost kind of like this really bad experiment where like you're going to teach them fundamental literacy, math, science, because it's black and white. But we're also going to just make them be in this really horrible experiment of just putting them all together and letting them kind of govern their emotional state. Just let them just figure it out, right? And so I think you get to an appalling moment where you go, what is going on here? Mm-hmm. Why are these things happening, right? And if Dom was to stay into therapy camp, and it's probably going to be a really good thing, because when it does happen, or when some bigger event does happen to him and he gets bullied, let's say.
Oh, don't say that.
I know, right? Nobody wants their kid to be bullied, but that's the reality.
True.
I think everybody gets bullied. No matter you're the bullier or the bully, eventually it's all going to happen to you one way or the other, right? Social media. Mm-hmm. Even the most prettiest and prolific people out there, they get bullied, right? So, okay. But I think there's a catch. There is a safe catch. Then what is that? What is that about About, recognizing the differences right now in the school system, that it's not up to par. We keep having a suicide. We have a meeting. We bring in some educators and some professionals at that point. Then they all leave, and then we go back to school. And then next week, math test, science test. Come on, guys, learn. And they're going, my friend just killed herself. And then 3 days later, my other friend killed themselves. In a world that looks like this. That's a lot. That in itself is like, let's stop the process, right? But the process doesn't stop. So how is Blue Moon, what is Blue Moon, Michelle, Jordan, the aspects of you now doing the social media, everyone, everywhere, our campaign efforts, Blue Moon Counseling, going to Blue Moon Therapy. We're not going to, but opening the nonprofit side of it. I mean, really is this kind of more holistic approach, right? This, wherever we can get funding, we got to find the funding. Wherever you come in the economics play, we need to put you in the place there, right? We need to have therapy camps attached to schools. Whether it's, I feel like, should be its own standing class. You could have this thing every day, one class every day, and it should be a therapy class. It should be an emotional state of mind of how do we work through, what is the coping skills? What conversations are they having?
Yeah, it's a skills training class. That's
right.
The whole program. It's a skills training program, and we're teaching them all those skills that they need to survive. The coping skills.
Yeah.
The social emotional learning skills, the how to build a life for yourself skills,
Yeah.
self-confidence. We're teaching them skills that no one else in this world is teaching them. And that's really what's going to make a difference for them. That's the missing piece.
And Jordan, do you feel like you're responsible to teach everything to Dom, to raise him, to give him everything, support this child 100% your own?
I feel like there's a lot of pressure on parents to do that.
Is that American pressure? do you
Yeah,
think?
it's pressure of, I mean, even looking at Pinterest moms and Instagram moms and all these people who look like they're just crushing it in a picture.
Crushing it.
And then I'm like, this morning, I was 10 minutes late for his Halloween party, running in with a cowboy hat in one hand and like my coffee that I had to stop for in the other. Like, and it's just all this pressure to just always be on it and like do all these things. But the cool thing about like having camp or having other people around is just the pressure is off. And I feel like schools, we try to throw just a assembly in there about let's not bully or let's not do this here. One time a year, let's talk about why we shouldn't do this. But there's so much more. Like bullying is a symptom of the problem. Like there's so many symptoms that we try to treat before we hit that crisis. Okay, we're getting into crisis because people are being mean. Well, no, people are being mean because they are having problems personally. Like people don't just go bully because they're fine. You don't pick on someone if you're doing fine. I feel like that's when you are picking each other up because you're like, hey, I'm doing okay.
Right.
You seem like you're not doing okay.
And it's not a movie version where you can bully the bully and then all of a sudden he becomes the really nice guy.
Totally.
Right.
We're picking on each other because it's usually a symptom of what we're going through.
There you go.
So I think that when we're doing these school things where it's like once a year we're going to have this big assembly, we're going to talk about why we shouldn't bully.
Yeah.
But let's all then move on and we've treated it.
We're good, right?
Yeah.
We're a school of no bullies.
So much more that needs to be talked about. And these kids need help with so many other things.
Right.
Like why is he bullying? Well, let's look. Well, usually if we peel back all those layers, there's either something going on at home or something going on inside of him that he needs to get out. He is that volcano.
I'm going to call you out right now, but how many beds did you get for Blue Moon campers just in the last 2 weeks?
17 beds. That was kids that were sleeping on the floor.
And
sleeping on the floor.
Sleeping on the floor. Some of them didn't even have pillows and sleeping on the floor.
And is that just the most appalling thing you ever heard in America? Like kids are sleeping on the floor?
Yeah,
they have no
just don't
furniture?
even think about it.
And you don't. And would you say any one of those kids from face value you would ever even know?
No.
Or would you even assume to care? No. And would you say that could overall, just the bed experience, the fact that you had to get 18 beds for our campers, right? And not one of them you would really say is like, oh, I would never have guessed you didn't have a bed.
No.
One.
I didn't even know they didn't have a bed, a lot of them, until we started giving beds and helping other kids. And then all the hands started going up and the moms started asking, like, actually, I have no furniture. Actually, we have no beds. And when I started doing house visits, even more so.
And then the systemic issue thing.
Judge-free zone for all moms. There's not an ill thought. I brought these beds over and I looked at those moms and I just want to hug them because I get it as a single mom. And a lot of these moms that I brought beds to, I'm not appalled at them having their kids on the floor. I'm like, I know that it is hard when you're choosing what you can do and you want to get some blankets and throw them down and be like, okay. But then those kids are the ones that have to go to school and look at their peers and then they're getting bullied. And these kids don't even realize like, hey, this kid just got up and came to school after sleeping on the floor, which is probably really hard to do.
Yeah.
And you peel back layers, right? Like you said, it makes it more human. You start understanding a story and everybody has a story, right? And when you start saying things like that, where it's just a bed, right? Oh, it's just a bed. Well, then why do they need the bed? And you found about their old home or their old issue and I had to leave my house or I got evicted. And then systemically, there's just like, it's more and more and more and more. And you go, how are you even standing right now? How are you alive right now?
I'm so impressed with a lot of them.
Oh my gosh, right? And then they start becoming, I think, more of a motivation story as opposed to a sympathy story because they're like, you are so much more stronger than I could ever be because look what you are still doing with such the bare minimums, right? But you're holding it together as best you can. And not to say that that's, again, like how many more issues and just by one layer, you got 18 beds for campers. You can't tell me that not one of them was either bullied or was a bully just because of that one situation. I can identify just that one thing. I don't have a bed. I don't know where to sleep. I don't have my own safe space. I'm not comfortable. I don't sleep. Yeah, I'm going to probably guess that, there's more than one kid that's either being bullied because of that, because of those disruptions,
become a target.
Or is the bully, right? Because of all that's going on in their life and it's so hard.
Totally.
And that's just one item. That's not even talking about anything else. Just talking about a bed.
Well, I think that's the big thing about, the therapy camp and taking care of the family, which is different from most other models too, is like, why did you raise beds for other kids? Why do we do this fundraising and this distribution of goods, this distribution from one community that doesn't need it, that actually is really grateful to, unload some of their material items such as beds and stuff, and so much generosity in my community and Jordan's community about people really step up and love to help when they know it's going to a child or a family or home that, and to just even pick them up and drive them is like the biggest thing that usually we can do. And, but that is part of us trying to take care of the whole child and the whole their whole family, is because, therapy with suicide and isolation and depression, or just unhappiness or just stress in the family, is that we can see when they're at camp different layers of their life that you couldn't just see at school. You can't just see as a teacher. You don't know which kids are sleeping on the floor, and I always, one of my kids, I'll never forget, I had no idea. And all of a sudden they're strung out and they're climbing roofs and they're jumping around and they're not doing well at school, and I'm getting called every day, come to the school, as I was being the liaison like Jordan was doing, and I'm coming and talking to the principal, and they can't manage it, and we're doing all these pieces for this child. And then it kind of came down to it, me talking to him, I'm like, what is going on? And it's like, I am not sleeping. I do not like my new home. There are rats in my home. I don't have a bed. I can hear bugs. I'm not okay. I'm not sleeping. And really just me having an eye-opening experience as well, be like, wow, him not sleeping and him feeling safe and comfortable in his new environment is dysregulating his entire system, where when we send him to school, he's operating on fumes. He's got nothing left to keep him calm. He can't learn, he can't focus, he can't be respectful, he can't follow rules, because his little basic line of survival is, he needs rest. And so that was really where the bed started, was really seeing him. And I would have never seen it without therapy camp, because I wouldn't have been in the home. I wouldn't have had so much time
been
with
in
him.
an office one-on-one and being told, fed information again, right? And don't get to see it firsthand.
And a mother would never just sit there and tell me, hey, you don't, they're not sleeping. They don't have, because they have a roof over their head. They have, there's a lot of things that moms do and parents and families do to take care of their children and families. And all of our families do a really good job with what they have of taking care of their children as a priority, but they need a little help.
And I think there's a thing that Blue Moon is trying to accomplish, and this is somewhat of the challenge right now, for it to be transparent, is, what kind of funding and how does this funding look like, and the breadth of, how much is needed. Because I think you can sit back and get very overwhelmed by the amount of help needed just in our community alone, right? And we've gone on this effort of trying to go, bring the circus, quote unquote, to you, and to communities, towns, neighborhoods, counties, cities that are, one, very underprivileged or just outside of the main metro area, where life gets a little bit harder every time you go further away from any big city, right? The funding gets less, the jobs are less. So economic hardship, first and foremost, I think, is the precursor to a lot of issues, right? Can't afford to eat, can't do a lot of things, and all of a sudden life is that much harder. There's this thing about when you go into nonprofit work, there is no profit. There is this thing about, in my opinion, is more of a socialistic view of things, right? Of sharing economies, sharing your wealth from one level to help another level to help the whole community. And not to get into politics as usual, right? That's just kind of touching base on it. But I think what the ask here is as well, is somewhat asking for this definition of that, the economics of it. Folks who have the same issues and families that have just the same issues, regardless of what the money is made, but some people can afford the support and the resources and some people can't. What's really funny in the research, if you go out there, folks, and I'm sure any parent that has an issue with their child and then starts educating themselves starts getting a little overwhelmed on what it really does look like to a parent, a single parent, to two parents. If you make above a certain level, $100,000 or more in the income in the home, to something less than $60,000 in the home, the average median is around $65,000. We know that most of the parents we serve and the more the guardians serve, it's probably well below $50,000 a year, right? In the household income. And so our ask is very much is that we have this somewhat sliding scale, right? You have this private pay. You have the ability for folks and parents in there who are successful, who have the economics to go ahead and support their kids in ways we all wish we could in some way or fashion or facet. But it's not just about filling them up with sports or dance or activity, right? I think to be competitive in this current world, look at even school, right? The college scandal, the college admission scandal. Big deal because it's showing you, one, if you got the money, no matter how you're doing, you're probably going to be afforded a little bit of an edge, a shortcut, right? Legal or illegal, doesn't really matter. You get an edge, right? And so we start taking the edges away, and then you're left with the kids who do live in poverty. It's not even just about the poverty, but it's about the access to resources, support, and what that looks like to come back to it. One thing we do find out about research is that no matter which end of the spectrum you come from, you absolutely impact each other, right? Mm-hmm. From an education reform to healthcare to all of those things all impact each other. So what we're asking is for that, is that piece and to have a little bit, I think, more involvement, right, on different levels of funding. One, like I said, private pay, nonprofit, insurances, right, donations, sponsorship, social media, right, the crowdfunding, this whole new way of how people are raising money for politics, for initiatives, for efforts. But there's so many different layers. If you guys just want to take one quick 2 minutes, because we got to wrap up here. But Michelle, if you like to ask or, talk about a little bit of the funding you're looking for on a certain levels, and then maybe leave that piece and then the social media stuff and the events that are coming. Jordan, if you want to kind of speak to that, and kind of informing our viewers, what's to come, what we are really kind of looking for. And then obviously, we'll have another show and keep having shows to kind of really bring this all kind of together and, really, I think, come out with our exact needs and plans. But so kind of start with the funding needs at this point.
Well, funding needs we're talking about two things. We're talking about the community we've been actively treating for about 12 months. And that group of kids, those 45 kids between the ages of 5 and 14 that are part of an existing therapy camp unit. And their funding, we've lost our funding through Medicaid, which was our primary insurance, which is I've been working with Medicaid for a very long time, and they no longer are willing to fund this program due to their own budget and reasons and restrictions. And so the 45 children and the 91 people in total, including their family members that we're actually treating, no longer can participate in therapy camp unless we get funding and donations and people who are willing to partner with us as company owners to allow them to keep their therapy camp, to keep their program alive. And so that is something that we're seeking financial support for, is to sponsor these kids so that they can keep therapy camp since their parents cannot afford it. And we're doing a couple ways to raise money for them. I think the most important thing about therapy camp for these kids and and we're going to kind of pause and just recruit and make some partners and figure out the alternative funding is summer camp. So really looking to fund their 8-week summer camp that will be happening, in June. And it's so important. I need sponsorships. I need scholarships for these kids because we cannot leave these kids home alone with nothing and put that pressure back on the families and them not have this safe place to go during the summers when they're left alone. And that's when it gets the hardest and they have the most isolation. And, so that's really what we're generating funding for. And we're doing that in a couple ways. There's some crowdfunding happening. We're going to be continually posting more GoFundMe on the media. We have a big gala event, which is happening on November 23rd, which is a Saturday. We have a beautiful location in Castle Pines that's been donated. We are going to be inviting an adult-only community to donate and to help us raise scholarships for these kids. And I know that we're going to be able to do it. And so that's going to be a big thing. We're going to have silent auction. I know that there's a ticket price. So even if you just kind of RSVP or if you want to just purchase the ticket to go towards the kids. So that's going to be a big thing that's going to help us raise these scholarships for these kids, especially for the summer. And then we're looking for some of the partnerships. So I'll be writing why we're switching to nonprofit, and why we've done that is so that we can qualify for grants, and that we can allow people to donate and get that tax write-off, and to allow other people to contribute to our nonprofit, so that we can treat those kids. The private pay kids is, the launch of private pay, meaning you can pay for it without using your insurance. Out of pocket. That new camp is starting as well. So that's another piece, is like going into the high schools and going to the middle schools and just partnering with the educators and providing our camp programming to your school. We can tailor it to what you need, and we can figure out how to do that. So if Arapahoe High School is needing a Blue Moon and Blue Moon team to come in and to offer a camp, and what I call it to the older kids is a little bit more of like a retreat. We kind of plan a weekend, we get all the kids, and we really do a lot of that. That's something that we are going to be doing as well, as we're expanding from everyone everywhere. We're not just going to be focusing on the community that we have been focusing on for the beginning of our company, due to the change in Medicaid. And so it does get paid for by private insurance. So if you have United Healthcare, if you have something, that's something that I think the sliding scale piece is really matching the service and the program, and to your ability to pay and take care of your child is definitely something we pride ourselves in. And then, Toy Drive. And go ahead, Jordan, talk a little bit about the media as well as the Toy Drive for this kids, because we will be making sure that the kids who we've actively treated, the 45 kids who are part of our treatment program, who, to be quite honest, are devastated, I think, a little bit about the loss of their camp and the transition, and not really knowing how to feel. I think we're going to be doing a special event tomorrow to kind of wrap up things with them and to talk to them about that. And they've known for a while it's coming, and we've been transitioning for a little while. But Christmas is something that matters a lot to people, or the holiday season. And that's the original way I started to really, even before camp, I started doing these bigger groups of communities of all my kids coming together and giving them, making sure they all have a special present under the Christmas tree. And it's kind of like the beds, it's like, if you can just bring a little bit of hope, a little bit of love, a little bit of like, I don't know who bought me this present.
Right.
It seems like Miss Michelle's the one buying it, but I'm not, I'm getting these donors.
It's not necessarily about just like, again, checking boxes and just getting things for kids. It's kind of the same thing like toy drives. Typically, you're just like, oh, anonymous gift, anonymous box, anonymous family.
Yeah, and
I'm anonymous, right? And then, what's very special about, I think, what your program and what Blue Moon brings is that caring piece, the human element, right? It's, I am a face that cares about you. I see you. Yeah. And in a lot of cases, you actually let them choose what they want, right? And then people come and give. But it also makes the giving a little bit more, I think, it's a lot just right. Like you sponsor a kid, you get your little mailer and their picture and how they're doing. But most times that's a different country and you don't even know if it's real. And you're like, is this a scam? I don't know, but I got a tax write-off, right? What you were talking about is exactly kids in our community. Literally going down 16th Street Mall, you most likely will bump into somebody. Going to Park Meadows, you will bump into one of our kids or one of our parent guardians or one of our staff or somebody involved, right? It's very much, and Denver is not the biggest of communities, if you ask me. It's still a small world. But that's a little bit of it as well, right? Is I'm not just getting you a bed to have bed. I'm not furnishing all of Colorado's kids without beds. But it's like taking an absolute care in someone's life that now you are part of this family, quote unquote, and I need to care for you. And there is no blame. There's no judgment, but I need to raise funds. I need to raise things for these families because they don't have a lot. And as part of the community and trying to uplift the community as a whole, I think it is asking from our neighbors and asking people with that success in their life and to feel not only are you making an impact, but it's someone literally next door. It is not a scam. It isn't somebody across the ocean. It's not this ambiguous, let's just help all children. It's like we can support. And if one good family could support one less unfortunate family, I think we get somewhere. And another one to another one. And then a city to help another city, right? I think that's Blue Moon's little cause and effect here. If I can get to a place where Denver, as big and as monstrous as and powerful as it may be in this state, it is the capital. Why can we not support another city?
So before I started working for Blue Moon, I actually sponsored 2 kids. The same 2 kids for a couple years in a row for Christmas.
Yeah.
So I got to know their names and their personalities and what they liked.
Yeah.
And I really got to grow and have some buy-in in the company before I even worked there, because I started seeing Michelle would send me little pictures of my kids. And I felt like I knew them. So then when I did start working there and I got to meet them and hug them, and it was the coolest thing ever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I bought you that.
Right.
And just knowing how much it means to them, and knowing now being with this company how much integrity there is in just serving the kids, and watching you guys. And I'm not just saying that because I'm partial. I mean, I am partial, but I see how much goes into feeding them and making sure that when we serve dinner, there's a little bit extra to go home on that night where we don't see them, or that we're making sure that they have new shoes and new backpacks for school that they're going to like, because we're invested in seeing them succeed. And if they have something they like,
just free,
they're going to do well. Yeah. So I really feel like if there is anyone out there that it's been on their heart to do this, talk to us about it. If you're on the fence or you need more buy-in, please. Because I feel like there's so much transparency in what we believe in and what we're doing, that if it's on your heart or anything, to come to the gala or message one of us, or let's talk about it, because these kids really do need the help. And whether it is the low income kid or the fortunate kid, we have kids in our community that need us just as much as the kids that we're sponsoring overseas, if not more, because they're right here and they're tangible and they're in front of us, and we can actually make that impact on a weekly basis. So
can you do the plug real quick? Where do our listeners and where do people who feel it in their heart now,
shameless plug,
where should they go?
So we have our Facebook, which is www.facebook.com/everyoneeverywhere-campaign is the biggest hub. We also have an Instagram where you can search Everyone Everywhere Campaign. We have a YouTube where you can watch all of our podcasts. Same thing, Everyone Everywhere Campaign. On our Facebook, you can find our GoFundMe page. I have it linked in almost every post, just because I really feel like I've been tugged before a couple times where I'll see a GoFundMe and then I'll see it again. And then I really see it and I remember how much I care about that person. And I'm like, okay, and it's just, for me, being able to know that I'm investing in my community and the people around me. So if you can, and if you feel called to, and if you feel led to, then definitely check out our Facebook page, Everyone Everywhere Campaign.
And what about for the toys? Let's talk about Christmas, because that is usually my easiest fundraiser, because it's right around that time. At the gala, we'll be accepting gifts at the time. Yeah. So that'll be timing. So if you want to come to the gala and you want to sponsor a kid, and that we will definitely, Jordan and I will let you know what your child is needing. We'll definitely match you up and sign you. Like I said, we have 45. Last year we got 200 gifts donated, and we did something they want, something they need, something they wear, something to read, which is really cool because they got a lot of their basic needs met, which at the time that was really what they needed. I feel like at this time we're just going to try to be raising money for their scholarships so they can keep their camp and doing one special gift. And so I know what those kids want and need, and I would be happy to talk to you. I'm not going to say it over the podcast because
if one of the kids here
they're listening, I don't want them to hear. But Jordan definitely knows. We're really excited about it. So even if you just want to do the toy drive and the gift and be like, I want to get these kids Christmas sponsored, and we have a pretty good list anyway, we would love to do that. And so I feel like you can contact us through any of those avenues. Just message, I want to help. Yeah. And when you do start seeing Facebook posts or anything like that, or if you want to call us directly, I think that's a possibility as well.
Yeah, I think email is always a good form and function for anybody just trying to reach out, wants any information. Michelle at, Eric at, Jordan at, bluemooncounseling.com. Regular spelling as well. There's no craziness. I end with a C, ERIC, MICHELLEJORDAN at bluemooncounseling.com. Yep. And that's pretty much it. So I thank everybody. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jordan, for showing up today. Hopefully we will have more discussions here in the near future. Thanks for everybody listening. Again, one last thanks to Chris here at Sphere Studios and for allowing us to have this awesome podcast. So everybody have a great, happy Halloween and be safe tonight. Stay warm and eat lots of candy. Thank you so much.